All right, everybody. It's pretty much the top of the hour. We're going to get started. And just letting you know that the session is being recorded. If you do want access to the recording afterwards, please shoot me a note and I'll be happy to provide you the link. Okay. All right, we're going to be talking about advanced methods for optimizing and re-implementing your ERP system. So in the case of the Sytem network, obviously we're talking about Infor Sightline, Infor Cloud Suite Industrial, but I just want everyone to know this applies to any ERP system, especially Tier 2, as well as any add-on or any, let's say, third-party application that you want to connect with your Infor system. Just going to let you know now, we're going to go over slides for about 10 minutes. Could be a little bit more, a little bit less. Okay. And after the slide presentation, I'll take a quick breather and see if there are any questions from the audience. I'll check the chat. Otherwise, I will continue to go on to the demo portion of this. Okay. So hopefully everyone's good with that. Okay. The very quick introduction is that our tool called ImplementERP.ai is for use in any and every phase of your ERP lifecycle. So what that means is whether you're a fairly new company and you're gathering requirements because it's going to be the first ERP system that you select and license and implement, or you've been around for a long time and you're upgrading from an old legacy application to a new one. So anywhere along those stages, this tool could be of massive use. And we really want you to understand the methodology that's embedded in the tool as well. Okay. So again, this session will be on post-go live optimizations, and in the rare case where it's necessary, in a re-implementation or business process improvements, but you'll see that the concepts apply to any of the stages of ERP, whether you're implementing one, selecting, etc. Quick note about me: 30 years of overall career experience, 20 in consulting, the majority of hours of which have been dedicated towards ERP. But I also have 10 years of experience in industry, which means that I actually worked as an executive within a manufacturing enterprise. I worked early in my career for a distribution company. So I have been in the seat of the end user plenty for that 10-year portion of my 30-year career. And I've worked in a number of industries, which means that I like to do that lean manufacturing practice, which is take from one industry what works and see if it can apply to another industry. So lots of cross, I would say, sharing of ideas and best practices and all of that. Moving on. So other than that instance where the company is fairly new and they're putting an ERP system for the first time, after that, really ERP is a never-ending life cycle, right? Because you could select the system after you collect requirements, okay, you collect requirements, select the system, license it, then you implement it, and then you go live and you say, well, there's still stuff we can do, still improvements that we should be pursuing, so you do the post-go live. But then things change, okay? Here are a list of some common ones. You grow, just in revenue and transaction volume. You grow geographically, maybe add some international territories. You acquire a company, or you are acquired. You expand product lines, or you have products, and now you're also going to offer services. Maybe you do field repairs, depot, etc. But business is a continuously changing cycle. So we say that the ERP life cycle is never over. Okay. Now, as we get ready to jump into the tool and the methodologies in the tool, okay, some primer slides. If you're doing an optimization or a re-implementation, right? One of the things that we can establish is there's a problem, okay? There's a problem, now what, okay? So in using intentionally nebulous, let's say junior consultant deliverables, we come up with some really good generic stuff that's absolutely correct, which is you have to identify the problem. What's not working? What do we believe the causes could be? And how big is that issue? Then after that, go through the investigation phase, right? So what about our system? What about a process? What about a procedure or policy is broken? Okay. Do we have a good idea of what the fix is? And do we have an idea of the order of magnitude of the solution? So how much effort and time is going to be involved into resolving our problem? And by the way, that really is that dividing line between an optimization and a re-implementation. Because if there's a lot that's broken, it's pretty much a re-implementation. But if the system's working, you just want to make it better in places, we call that an optimization. Okay. And finally, when you done the investigation, you've done the identification of the problems, now it becomes a little bit more concrete, a little bit more mechanical. What are we going to do to improve some of the forms? Do we need to create some new forms using config console? Okay. Do we need integrations from some third-party solutions or applications? Or maybe the system is fine, but we have a lot of processes or policies that don't map to the functionality, and the functionality is superior to our policies. Therefore, that's where the break is. Okay. So now that the nebulous and the generic consultantese, has been stated, now you're in a place where you have to decide what you're going to do. Okay. So we call this the proverbial fork in the road. To be more specific, we commonly see this. Company goes back to its original methodology. They go, oh, let's do a project charter. Okay. And let's face it, project charters usually develop once, after a few weeks or a few months, usually not used again, although I do recommend that you establish it. You might have a fancy model for a steering committee, aka steerco. You set up a SharePoint. You have lots and lots of meetings on the system. You have status meetings once a week, twice a week, or more often to see where you are. And then the endless volume of emails on Outlook flying back and forth. Okay. That is a traditional PM method, not just for implementations, but even for re-implementations and system optimizations. The slightly improved version of that is where a company adds in a tool like a smart sheet or a ClickUp. Some companies like to use Azure DevOps. It does make the overall PM model a little bit better, but what we'd like to talk about today is an entirely new way, something completely different, okay? And the only piece that we'd like to retain here, besides a single tool and methodologies in our solution, okay, is the whole system piece. So we believe, move this here, we believe the meetings around the system are invaluable. This is the one where the client, whether it's one individual or a team, and the consultant or consultants, functional consultant, financial consultants get together for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to work on the system itself. Invaluable. That is something we recommend never change. Okay. So from here, I'm going to ask you a challenging question. How did these traditional models, a new tool with embedded models that work radically differently from the existing PM tools that exist out there with existing PM methodologies that were not originally designed for ERP? They were designed generically and then fitted, if you will, to a certain extent to help ERP projects. Okay? we believe the better approach is to design something from scratch that is centered and focused around ERP. So if you remember the generic consulting slide from earlier, we had mentioned the process was identify, investigate, and implement. So how do we recommend you identify? Well, if an optimization or reimplementation is ready, the break in the system is shown or evidenced by virtue of a break in a process, okay? So whether it's your monthly recording, AKA using the lingo of enterprise architecture out there called record the report. And by the way, if these are terms that you're not familiar with, we'd love to have a conversation with you, because this is what the Fortune 500 has been using for over 20 years. And it's working out quite well because of the standardization and nomenclature. But if there's something that's broken in how your company goes from lead creation to managing the leads, to, let's say, quoting those customers, to creating the orders, what have you, something in that quote to cash arena. If there's something broken in the engineering side of the house, okay, design to refine is where the engineers create new items, add features, new revs, etc. Is one of those sub-processes broken? Okay. Order to cash, the non-quotation related order taking, order processing, and order creation, completion. For this particular example, so we can make something nice and clear, I've selected the procure to pay, the procurement model. Okay. So let's take the optimization scenario of procure to pay, and then let's take what we would call a re-implementation scenario of the same overall procurement model, okay? So first of all, in identifying what is broken, okay, you would first want to see if something here isn't working, or if something here is missing. So how does the procure to pay procurement mega process work? Generally speaking, the first sub-process is that some indicator pops up a notice that there is a need, a subcomponent, a raw material, a consumable, what have you, okay? Then from there, you have the process of creating a requisition, making a request, okay? Could be the production folks, it could be someone else, it could be someone in procurement that generates a requisition. Usually it's someone where the material is consumed. Okay. But from there, what happens? Whether it's the end use team or the procurement team, just select the item that you need and the vendor from whom you need it. Then from there, you create a PO, okay, or you approve the requisition, which then becomes a PO. You issue the PO out to the vendor, and if there's changes needed or something, quantities, what have you, do an update, okay? And then I have here, you validate and pay, but then, wait a second, is that all? Is there something majorly missing? So this is a good real life example of what we frequently find in enterprises that are, definitely under a couple hundred people, but even enterprises that are under a couple thousand employees. And sometimes there's flat out something missing, okay? In this case, we believe that the receiving sub-process is missing, right? So boom, the identification part has been identified using a process mapping, a process assessment model. So I'm going to go in here and create that. I'm going to put PO receiving, okay? So now it got added. the tool, it always adds it at the end. So I'm going to use this functionality to put it where it belongs, because it belongs between where the PO is issued and potentially updated and where you pay the vendor because you received the material. So now, if you're thinking, okay, this is helpful for identifying a process break issue. Now, what has this got to do with, my Infor CSI system? And this is where we say, yeah, we agree. So this is what we have mapped. This process to system mapping, or the system to process mapping, which is a feature does not exist in any of the, let's say, ADO, PM tools, doesn't exist in Smartsheet or ClickUp. It doesn't exist in Jira, but we believe it is so critical. And I've been doing this on PowerPoint for many, many years before I created the tool, because it helped to identify where the gap is. Where it's far superior is where it's on a tool where now it's usable. So first of all, I have here identified which forms are needed, okay, to make this sub-process in my overall procurement process work. So I need the items form, material planner form, inventory planner form, the workbench form. And those of you who are deep in Infor CSI and previous iterations like Sightline, we know the workbench is just invaluable series of forms. Okay. So I have identified which forms support which subprocess. Now, going to that subprocess that didn't exist before, this means I probably was doing the receiving outside the Infor system. Therefore, I'm already not utilizing the overall features, okay, that Infor has as a fully integrated, platform, because someone could have gone in, did the receiving off of the PO lines, okay, and then it helps my three-way match, so my AP team can make the payment without doing a lot of research. By virtue of the fact that I didn't have any forms in use, okay, first of all, that is a perfect example of an optimization piece. But using this framework, you now know exactly where the break is. Okay. So what am I going to do? Now that I identified that this sub-process was flat out not done on CSI, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to create, okay, I'm going to use the formal names. Okay, so that's the name of the form that I need to have. Okay, and there's actually another one that we frequently use. You guys probably know this. This is list. All right, so these forms, if I build them out, will probably allow me to do most or all of my receiving right into the system, thereby allowing me to utilize more of the AP payments functionality and help my AP team out. They don't have to go and check with my receiving and see if I have any like credit memo requests, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So it's not just about doing this though. Let me show you where this goes into allowing you to know exactly what to do to really build this out. By clicking this box, it says, I'm evaluating this form called purchase order receiving that I never utilized before. Maybe Infor or the system integrator, taught me about it, but for some reason I didn't do it, okay? Some questions, okay? Do I have any integrations that are needed to make this form and the data tables reflecting that form work? Do I need to change anything regarding workflow? Do I need to add permissions or affect some profiles, okay, etc.? If I do, I click here and then I fill out some forms and it does. Do I need a script for my end users after this? For the vast majority, it's going to be yes. Now, this is a big one. If the form out of the box works exactly how I need, I don't need to change the script because I'm using the form as it is out of the box. If I do need to make some changes because the form doesn't work exactly how it is out of the box, then I got to reflect those changes in an updated script. Therefore, I'm going to say, I need a script, yes, but I also need changes. Okay. And this attachment section is where you now can take screenshots so you can send to your consultant. Okay, I'm going to draw a circle. I need a field here, or I need to change a permission. I need to put in a workflow, what have you. Okay. So that is where you can, have the artifacts and avoid utilizing the SharePoint too much, because the SharePoint file doesn't have the direct context to this specific form. Okay. Now, once I add a change, let's say it's not ready out of the box. Okay. I need to add a field. Okay. Then, when I identified that a change is needed, and by marking this complete, I'm saying, okay, I need one change, and that's it. So development team, consultant, I don't need anything else. It's just one item. Then the consultant knows I need to design something based on that end user's request. So the request is called add a field. I have a due date. I have a status. It's in process. I've now done the design. A month later, a week later, okay, after the approval, I've completed it. Then I've turned it over to the client. The client has tested it, okay, and now this is ready at the end. Before you do an iteration release or go live, okay, you can now do a sign off that all the end users that are going to use this form are trained, and that all the testing was done. So you can sign that off. So when we have, go back into the process box here. Oh, excuse me, one more quick point. It shows you the form, the status of that form, by the way, okay? It tells you what process and subprocess it's supporting, and then it tells you how complete you are. And also, I can identify, hey, we don't have a form owner assigned to this. I'm going to change that. So I'm going to show you something called the status center in a second. Okay. But going back to the process, when I note that I need the Infor CSI form called PO receiving, okay, this is not just a hollow, here it is, yeah, I'm going to need this form. By clicking on the detail, it really goes in depth on what the form needs. The second reason for me to go back in here is I hope you're noticing that by having this structure, this framework here, as well as the process framework here, it really removes the need for somewhere between vastly all, okay, and literally all emails going back and forth. It also removes the need for the vast majority of status meetings, because if I'm a procurement person or an operations person who manages the procurement side, and I work with one person in purchasing, and then we have an Infor consultant, the three of us are going to be following all of the data that exists in this evaluation form to see how ready the PO receiving form is from the time we identify that form is needed to the time that it is done, okay, and ready for release. So there are other people going to be curious about the status of it, absolutely. But in terms of the day-to-day work on it, it's pretty much going to be the three of us, which really eliminates the need for outside individuals to have to go through this and sit through a status meeting that maybe doesn't pertain to them so much in detail. Okay. So let me see real quick if there are any questions Oh, we have a question. All right. Karina, do you have a question from somebody? Okay, I think you just were noting that you had joined. Okay, very good. All right, let's get back in here. Okay, so a couple of quick comments regarding this. Okay, first of all, there's more to this process of the data that's shown in this process page than what you see here. Okay, besides the framework that tells you, which forms are necessary to support which subprocess and all that, there's a scope page. Now, why is that so important? Okay, because in the world of identifying whether this is an optimization project or a re-implementation project, we want to know stuff like this. There are 20 forms needed for a procurement process. Okay. 18 are complete. We've now identified that 2 that are not complete. So from an initial acid test perspective, I can tell you that this is truly an optimization effort, because the procurement is largely working and largely on Infor. Okay. And also, if I want more detail, I can go in there and see, okay, how many forms exist for the first subprocess called identifying demand. The next one for preparing a request. So there's a lot here I can see on details of how much is done. So for example, how many there are, how many are complete, therefore how many are incomplete. So lots of detail here that gives you that perspective. But now it's not just about the procurement process. You might have order to cash or the engineering design processes, the finance reporting processes, what have you, okay? So while I didn't build it out here, okay, when I do, and let's say I have 50 forms from Infor that are supporting my financial reporting process, and I see that 47 are done and working, and 3 are not complete, whether I just added them or they were identified long ago and they were just never completed, so they're not used. That gives me that scope. It's a big deal, okay? Now let me go back into process, and this time, instead of looking at the optimization scenario for procure to pay, okay, I'm going to collapse this. Let's look at the re-implementation scenario for procure to pay. So what does that mean, really? It means that I never launched the procurement process on Infor. Never did it. Maybe I identified all the forms that were necessary, but for some reason, maybe it was a time crunch, maybe the focus was just on financials, whatever it was, I didn't do it. Therefore, it would be a re-implementation. And how could I see that very quickly as evidenced by the summary sheets? Well, so I collapse the optimized one. So if you see the implementation scenario, so obviously these can't exist in the same project. So just pretend these are two different projects. But in the re-implementation scenario, I have 20 forms that were identified. I have not a single one that is complete. Therefore, this is a straight up implementation or re-implementation of procurement. Okay. So I can, first of all, if I have a funding approver who needs to approve my consulting fees, so I can, get this, or I need to do some management reporting to say, guys, we need to get procurement and purchasing added onto Infor because we don't have it on Infor today. Okay. Then information like this helps to go and fight for that money and say, okay, we need $150,000 for consulting, and we're going to need some temps in here because 4 of our people need to be focused on this half the time. This really helps you to get that kind of information. Okay. And very similar to the optimization model, Now, it gives the same picture, but again, the difference is, okay, here you're going to see that nothing is filled out. Nothing is filled out. Why? Because all that happened in the implementation was the consultants identified for me which forms I would need, but we never got to it. We never built it out. So that means that I have to see if there's any integrations required for the tables for this form, security permissions workflow, we need anything there to do that. Again, the same questions exist, whether I need a script for end users, and depending, again, whether the form is ready to go out of the box, and a lot of times it isn't, right? So pick yes, put some due dates, and then I take snapshots, send notes to the consultant of what's needed, so I attach, things here. I do a review of that form, and I say, you need to, add these fields, you need to, I don't know, let's say reorder the fields, what have you. So I would add stuff here, okay? And I would keep adding stuff based on what I found out as needs, okay? I'm just gonna put in 1 and 2, just so I can show the reporting for this later, okay? Now again, to reiterate, when I identify the changes that are needed to this form, those needs pass on to the design phase of it, the build out of it, the testing of it, so it's consistent all the way through cutover readiness. Okay, so the same model. Now, let's go to the why I put 1 and 2, and whether we're tracking on time, we're not tracking on time, on the status of these changes that are necessary. There is a page called the Project Status Center. Okay, and in the Project Status Center, what it does is it's primarily designed for the PM. Other people will look in there from time to time, no doubt about it. But this is for the PM to, first of all, know things like, how many do I have that are late? Oh, lucky I only have 1 form that is not following the schedule for the dates that were selected and all those various date fields and the due date, due fields that you guys saw on the prior pages, okay? How many are not started? Ooh, well, they're not late. There's a lot that's not started, okay? How many are on time? Okay, a couple. Okay. So this would be a very, very different look because we're looking at the re-implementation scenario, right? So let's go back though, okay? And here by taking a look at the optimized versus the re-implementation one, okay? Because you notice that for that scenario, all but 2 are done. So I can go by, I can filter by not started. I can filter by late. I can filter by complete. Okay, that's going to be a popular one for the PMs to keep track of what is out there. Okay, but there's a lot more filtering that can be done besides that. So let's say that in this scenario of optimizing procure to pay, again, this is not the re-implementation scenario, but the optimize. Okay. I can see how many forms, exist, subprocess. I can track by owners, and I intentionally left a lot of these blank, and I'll show you why in a little bit. I can go by script status, go by current phase, okay? There's a lot that I can filter by. And that helps the PM to know if people are tracking stuff on time. So the other thing I'm hoping you guys have noticed is this same model applies to regular full implementations where you might have 700 or 800 forms, and it's neither an optimization nor a re-implementation. It's a straight up implementation, right? But this tracking mechanism helps the PMs and other people too, but again, primarily PMs, to see who's late, to see which forms are on time, which ones aren't, which processes are going well, which processes aren't going well. Using this, again, really eliminating the need for two things. Number one, research. I want to know how the creating PO subprocess, is going within the overall procure to pay mega process, because I'm worried about it. I'm hearing some concerns, but without a methodology or tool like this, when it go back to Outlook, like shown in the slide that shows the traditional model, and you're going to be emailing people or calling people, having those twice a week status meetings where a bunch of people are on, even though only a little bit of the call pertains to them. Here is where it's a lot faster. And you say, I just want to know what's late. I just want to know what's late. Okay. Here it's the identified demand. Oh, maybe the reason is we don't have an owner. Okay. Maybe if I sign an owner, that will help. So I'm going to sign, John Lee as the owner. Now he can sort and see that he owns this form, but from now on, if I'm concerned about it or have any questions, I'm going to go track him down. So let me see here. It's procure to pay and reimplementation, identify demand. So reimplementation, identify demand. So that form, now has the owner. And now if I jump in here, I can see where they are. And I'll give John a few days to get started, to schedule an hour with the consultant to see, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and identify the changes that are needed, and, start taking a look at the script and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to check in a few days to see if they're tracking on this. Okay? And when I say check in a few days, simply going back to this form tracker. And again, there was only one item that's late. So I'm just going to go see what's late and see if this form called items that's supporting this process and this subprocess, I'm going to go see if it's still late. And if it is, then I'm going to give John a call and see what's going on. But I didn't need a status meeting to do that. And I didn't need a bunch of emails going back and forth. Okay. Let me see if there are any questions. Nope, there are not. All right. So let me go to one more piece and show you the functionality here. So the dashboard that we show is, includes what we'll call traditional views, which are like how many integrations are there involved in our project, how many additional requirements like security and workflow and all that are there, how many design activities or tasks are there, build, et cetera, et cetera. So this is more of a traditional view. But this is one that doesn't exist in any tool, and that is how far along are we to being able to launch a process? And that is the big difference, because if I don't have my procurement process, on Infor, because we just couldn't get to it or something, there's another reason. Okay? But now we are, in the throngs of building it out, enabling it, and it's 2 months in, it's not a big project. I want to know how many tasks there were, how many were done, okay? And that way I see how close we are to being able to launch it. Okay. All right. So in a nutshell, that is showing how we recommend companies do the optimizations and the re-implementations. And really, guys, the whole model is off of mapping the process to the forms by virtue of breaking the process into sub-processes and identifying which Infor forms are necessary. Okay. And I do also want to mention that just kind of for fun, we built out a couple of other scenarios where, which I won't show this one, but let's say there's a specific process that you guys have and nobody else has. Okay, then there's two things you can do. One is, okay, you can do this. Say, I'm going to use config console, okay, and I'm going to do, I'm not even going to think of a name for now, special form, okay. And that way, and let's actually give an owner now. So it's not just existing forms. If you're going to be using the configuration console to build stuff out, you can identify it as such, okay? But the other one is you can just create, let's say there's a process that's not standardized, so you don't want to use it from our process library. You're going to create your own, okay? My super duper special and unique process. Okay, add that. It always goes to the bottom. So I'm going to add subprocess 1, subprocess 2. Okay, I just add 2 for the sake of time. And when I do that, I now can add forms. Okay. Super duper form 1. Okay, I always have to put a due date. I'm going to add a form here too. Super duper form 2. Okay. Let's just pick that now. Okay. So you are building in your own unique process, whether unique to your company, unique to your industry, what have you. Okay. And whether you're using existing Infor form, you're building one out, configuration console, you're radically modifying existing form, whatever. The great thing is once you get in here, okay, into the detail, you can identify what those needs are, okay? And you can track how the design and the build out is going, the testing of all that here, which is something is absolutely missing from the generic PM tools and doesn't allow you to do stuff like implementation scoping, okay? The statusing, okay? Oops, there we go. And then of course the dashboards with the process readiness piece. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. See if there are any questions or comments. Please, if you have a question, put it into the Q&A. Oh, okay, great. Okay, so we have a question about how this is licensed and how much it costs. Okay. I do have a slide on that. So if you'll allow me to do so, I'm going to show that. Okay. It's like I paid you money. Okay. But our product is different from the other ones. Like if you go with ClickUp or Smartsheet, they do give you base support around the tool, but we share with you, we do a few hours with you, on a regular basis to make sure that you built out the tool correctly, okay? And then second, as you have questions along the way, okay, we give you a couple hours a month so we see that you're using the tool correctly, that your artifacts that you're using from the tool are being used correctly. We will show you what to pull from it to plug into a status report. So instead of spending 6 hours on a weekly or monthly status report, you can get one done in probably 20 minutes or less. And I've done thousands of status reports over my 20 plus years in ERP. So, we like to help you with that. But we can do a custom package where there's no support provided for you, but we don't recommend it. We like our model where we share with you best practices through a few hours, and then we give you full access to the platform.